Dear students, welcome to our science episodes. We are going to discuss today the main principles of heredity. The main principles of heredity. In this episode, we are going to discuss the inheritance of two pairs of contrasting traits. This is what Mendel studied. Smooth and yellow fruit, smooth and green fruit, wrinkled and yellow fruit, wrinkled and green fruit. So if you notice, here are two traits. And this is the opposite one. So smooth and yellow, smooth and green, wrinkled and yellow, wrinkled and green. So two pairs of contrasting traits. In the first generation, when he did his experiment, in the first generation, plants had smooth and yellow seeds. And when he left the first generation plants to self-pollinate again, to produce the second generation, he got the following ratios. So let's see together this picture. Smooth, rounded, and yellow. Here, green and wrinkled. The first generation will all have yellow and round, smooth. Why? Because they are the dominant traits, the stronger. If two like this, hybrid, they are not pure, will cross-pollinate or self-pollinate, whatever, they will produce the second generation. And this is the ratio of the second generation. 9 will be yellow and rounded, smooth. 3 green and rounded or smooth. 3 yellow and wrinkled, and only 1 green and wrinkled. Here is the ratios. 9 to 3 to 3 to 1. 9 smooth and yellow, 3 smooth and green, 3 wrinkled and yellow, 1 wrinkled and green. Now we come to Mendel's second law, the law of independent assortment of hereditary factors. When two individuals bearing a pair or more of alternative contrasting traits are crossed, the trait of each pair is inherited independently of the others and appears in the second generation at a ratio of 3 dominant traits to 1 recessive trait. What about in human beings? Many human hereditary traits follow the Mendelian heredity, where the trait is controlled by one pair of genes. It can be dominant or recessive. If you receive at least one dominant gene from either parent, so you will have the dominant trait. And if you will receive a recessive gene from both parents, you will have the recessive trait. Here we go. These are some examples of dominant genes like cleft chin, widow peak, dimples, brown or black hair, freckles, brown eyes, and free earlobe. And here are some recessive genes resulting in recessive traits. No cleft, no widow peak, no dimples, blonde hair, freckles, gray or blue eyes, and attached earlobe. Time for questions. Explain on genetic basis the traits of offspring resulted from the cross between a man who has curly hair and a woman who has straight hair, and show the genetic structure. The curly hair is dominant. So H capital, H small. The straight hair is a recessive, weak gene, 2H small. Again, my advice to you is to form this table. Distribute the genes, H capital, H small, H small, H small. So this is the curly hair and this is the straight hair. And then combine them together. So the capital H with the small h, the capital H with the small h, the small h with the small h, the small h with the small h. So half of the generation will have curly hair and half of the generation will have straight hair, 50 to 50%. Okay, genes. What are genes? If you look at the nucleus of the cell, inside the nucleus there are X-shaped chromosomes. These chromosomes consist of two chromatids. This one is a chromatid and this one is another chromatid, and they are attached together at the center. Each chromatid chemically consists of DNA. This is DNA, which carries the hereditary traits of the living organism and also some proteins. The genes, they are part of the DNA, a segment of the DNA. So genes are parts of DNA present on the chromosomes, and they control the individual's hereditary traits. The two scientists, Watson and Crick, were able to make a model of the DNA molecule. The DNA molecule is composed of two strands coiled around each other like a spiral ladder, called the double helix. What is the double helix? This is the DNA. The gene is the building block of the nucleic acid DNA. And the gene consists of more smaller blocks, consecutive units called nucleotides. This is the DNA composition. If you can look at this picture, you will see DNA is composed of two strands of coiled around each other like the spiral ladder, called the double helix. The sides of this ladder consist of desoxyribose sugar and phosphate groups, while the steps consist of groups of nitrogenous bases, which are adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. And if you notice, the adenine will pair with the thymine always, and the cytosine will pair with the guanine. It's always like this. This is the composition or the structure of the DNA. But how do you inherit your genes? We discussed before that we inherit our genes from the parents. We inherit half of the genes from the mother and the other half from the father. Meiosis is the process producing the gametes. What are the gametes? The gametes are the reproductive cells, the eggs in the female and the sperm in the male. These are gametes. And after fertilization, these gametes form a zygote, which is going to give a baby or the fetus or the offspring. Each cell in the fetus body carries a complete set of genes responsible for the appearance of hereditary traits. So, the mother cell contains half the genes, the father cell contains the other half of the genes. I'm talking, of course, about the gametes. And when they will combine together, they will form a zygote, or that will grow after that into a fetus, and this zygote will contain the whole set of genes. How do genes perform their function? Badal and Tatum scientists. They won the Nobel Prize in the year 1958, and they discovered the means of how the gene controls the appearance of a trait, where they found that genes are forming enzymes. These enzymes are producing chemical reactions. As a result, proteins are formed, and this protein is responsible for the traits. So if you can see here, the DNA is formed of segments of genes. Each gene will result at the end in a protein. This protein represents a hereditary trait. So what is mutation? It is a change in the nature of the hereditary factors that control the traits of a living organism, which results in a change in the living organism's trait. So it's a change. Mutation is a change. Change in the composition of one or more genes, which will lead to change in the hereditary trait. And this change is, of course, transmitted from one generation to another. It's inherited. What are the types of mutation? You remember the nitrogenous bases of the DNA, the cytosine, the thymine, the adenine, the guanine. This is the normal sequence. If this is the normal sequence, so no mutation. Let me show you another example where a guanine base could be inserted in this place, and this mutation is called insertion. So this forms a new sequence, which is not the same as the normal sequence. So here is an insertion mutation. Example number C. Look, the adenine here is removed here. It's deleted. So this is a deletion mutation. Example number D. Duplication, or the cytosine and the thymine here is duplicated. Abnormality again. The last example is the inversion. Here in the normal sequence is CTAG. Here CATG. So there is a conversion or an inversion or reverse. The T and the A are reversed. Another type of mutation. So the types of mutations are insertion, deletion, duplication, and inversion. Here we come to the Human Genome Project. This is a detailed map including all the human chromosomes in each and every cell in your body. The total is 46 chromosomes. So this means that in each cell in your body there are 46 chromosomes. Time for questions. Suppose we have a pea plant with tall stem and green pod, so two contrasting traits. Pollinates another one with short stem and yellow pod. Explain on the basis of genetic principles the genetic structure for the first and the second generations. Tall stem, green pod, these are pure and dominant. Short stem, yellow pod, these are pure also but recessive, because small letters, here capital letters. We're going to write the phenotype at first. A plant with tall stem and green pod versus a plant with short stem and yellow pod. Here is the genotypes or the genes. So tall gene and green gene. Both of them are capital, so they are dominant. A plant with the short stem, the small t, and the yellow pod for the small g. When they cross-pollinate each other, they will result in the first generation tall or short. Of course, tall, because the tall trait is the dominant. The tall gene is the dominant. So T capital, T small, and G capital, G small. So green or yellow, green. So this will result in plants with tall stem and green pod, 100% dominant and hybrid at the same time. They are not pure. What about crossing? Cross-pollinating the first generation together, you will get in the second generation this ratio: 9 tall stem and green pods, 3 tall stem and yellow pods, 3 short stem and green, 1 short stem and yellow. Dear students, thank you for watching and waiting for you in other episodes.